The biting wind lashed my face like knives. I knelt on the unyielding bluestone tiles of the Yong'an Marquis Manor, staring at the pair of tight boots embroidered with auspicious cloud patterns. Their owner was my own father, Yoon Junhai. He held a gleaming scroll of official documents, gazing down at me from his lofty height. There was no warmth in his eyes, only irritation at having his peace disturbed. "Gee, your stepmother is right," he said, words tumbling out so fast it seemed every extra syllable was a waste. "With your temperament, if you don't mend your ways, you'll bring disaster to this house, sooner or later. Go to the northern border for a few years. The hardship there will temper your heart. When you finally understand your mistakes, write back." I lowered my head, a self-mocking curve tugging at my lips. My stepsister Yoonjiro clung to Liu Shichin's arms, weeping delicately and pitifully. Yet her voice carried perfectly to every ear. "Sister, it's all my fault for falling into the water so carelessly. If you hadn't jumped in to save me, that lecher never would have seen your body. Father is only sending you to the border to protect your reputation." What a perfect excuse, protecting my reputation. That lecher had clearly been a broken-down thug bought by Liu Shichin. The accidental drowning had been a clumsy trap from the start. But Yoon Junhai didn't care about truth. He only cared that Yoonjiro still had a chance to enter the palace selection, while I, the legitimate daughter whose reputation was now ruined, had become a stain on his future. "I want my mother's dowry," I said, lifting my head and meeting his eyes directly. Yoon Junhai's brows snapped together. He was about to explode when I pulled a pre-written deed from my sleeve. "This is the inventory my maternal grandfather prepared for my mother's dowry. It bears the official seal and the imperial gifts bestowed by His Majesty that year. Father, if you want me to leave quietly, return these to me. Otherwise, I will dash my head against this wall today and let the entire capital witness how the Marquis of Yong'an drove his legitimate daughter to death and swallowed the imperially bestowed dowry." My voice was soft, yet every word struck like a hammer on stone. Yoon Junhai prized his face above all else. His complexion turned the color of pig liver in an instant. Liu Shichin opened her mouth, but I silenced her with a single icy glance. "Aunt Liu, I know exactly how many shops and fertile fields you've squandered. I want only silver and medicinal herbs now. Refuse and we'll settle this before the Ministry of Justice." In the suffocating silence that followed, Yoon Junhai finally yielded. He feared this worthless shard of porcelain might shatter his gilded reputation. Half an hour later, 2 shabby carriages waited at the rear gate of the manor. Inside were no bolts of fine silk, only the single chest of silver I had fought to reclaim, several boxes of precious herbs, and the medical book passed down from my maternal grandfather's family. Hongshu, my maid, stood behind me, eyes red and swollen. She clutched my sleeve, voice trembling. "Miss, are we truly going to that god-forsaken border? I'm afraid we'll never return." I stepped onto the carriage footboard without hesitation. I glanced once at the gilded plaque of the Yong'an Marquis Manor, then turned away. "It's for the best if I never return." My fingers brushed the stack of silver notes hidden in my robes. This was my capital for survival from now on. "Hongshu, fetch the family register." Before departing, I used the excuse of taking my late mother's memorial tablet and retrieved the inner page belonging to me from the ancestral hall. On that thin sheet of paper, I personally crossed out the 3 characters Yunji with my own brush. From this day forward, the Yong'an Marquis Manor's legitimate eldest daughter no longer existed in this world. The carriage wheels crunched over snow, creaking steadily as we left the capital's splendor behind. I lifted the curtain and watched the city walls blur into the distance. Instead of sorrow, I felt an unprecedented freedom. This Marquis Manor is a cage that devours people. They thought sending me to the border to suffer would break me. They never realized it was the very lifeline I had prayed for. As long as the deed remained in my hands, as long as the silver lasted, I could live anywhere under heaven. On the road we passed a pair of yamen runners escorting criminals. In the bitter wind, once proud men now looked like stray dogs. The capital's wealth and glory were nothing but flowers in a mirror, moons in the water. I withdrew my gaze and instructed the driver, "Faster. We must reach the relay station tonight. Don't delay our entry into the next city." The carriage rolled steadily north. The air grew drier, the wind and sand fiercer. Green faded into withered yellow and gray. Hongshu dozed inside the carriage while I sat upright, reading the yellowed book by the dim oil lamp before finally closing it. 7 years. Yoon Junhai had said he was sending me to suffer for 7 years. 7 years from now, we'll see who kneels before whom begging forgiveness. On the 3rd night after crossing the pass, the most terrifying crisis of my life struck. We had thought passing Jiayu Pass meant safety. Instead, at a mass grave, we encountered roaming Hu bandits. The driver leapt from the carriage as the panicked horses bolted, dragging Hongshu and me deep into the mountain wilderness. The moment the carriage smashed against a boulder and shattered, a heavy sword tore through the air and pierced the chest of the leading bandit. That was the first time I saw Gu Linwan. He was covered in blood, propped against the cave wall, long sword braced against the ground. His eyes burned with the ferocity of a lone wolf. His dark armor was battered, the inner lining soaked black with blood. He was clearly a stray soldier who had crawled out of a pile of corpses. "Don't come any closer," he rasped, voice thick with killing intent. I shoved aside the broken planks pinning me and silenced Hongshu's sobs. My gaze locked on the gaping wound in his abdomen. Blood poured freely through the gaps in his armor. If the bleeding wasn't stopped, he wouldn't last half an hour. I'm a physician. I pulled hemostatic powder and mulberry bark thread from my medicine chest, forced myself upright and approached. "If you want to live, put the sword away." He stared at me, fingers tightening around the hilt until the veins stood out. Finally, dizzy from blood loss, he released it and collapsed unconscious. In the drafty cave, I lit my flask of strong liquor. Without anesthetic, I sealed his major acupoints with silver needles, enduring his unconscious spasms, and painstakingly extracted the broken arrowhead from his wound. He never uttered a single groan. Only at the very end did he seize my wrist with terrifying strength, nearly crushing bone. "Save me," he murmured, eyes closed, voice barely audible. "I won't fail you." For the next half-month we hid in an abandoned village at the border. Hongshu was terrified and kept her distance, but I had no choice. I had to care for him. The local authorities were hopelessly corrupt. The common people lived day to day in fear. To avoid suspicion, I claimed he was my distant cousin. On the 7th day he woke. Gu Linyuan asked nothing about my background. His deep, unfathomable eyes simply held secrets I could not yet read. "Miss Yoon, the border is chaotic. A lone woman with only a maid cannot survive here." He sat on the heated earthen bed, whittling a stick, gaze fixed warily on the window. "You saved my life. This life is yours." I smiled bitterly and handed him the medicine I had brewed. "I want your life. I only want to survive here." He paused, then looked straight at me. "Then marry me. With a man at your side, the local thugs won't dare harbor indecent thoughts." I froze. I was the legitimate daughter of a capital marquis. Even though I had torn my name from the register, the pride in my bones remained. Yet watching the hollow-eyed refugees drifting past the window, I knew he spoke the truth. "I have no betrothal gifts to offer," he said with a self-deprecating curl of his lips. "Nor can I give you wealth or glory. I'm merely a rough soldier with military household registration." I agreed faster than either of us expected. No red silk, no ancestral hall. We went to the past town and registered our marriage with simple documents. I became Yunji, he became Gu Linyuan. The moment our fingerprints pressed onto the papers, we became a lawful family in this chaotic world. On our wedding night, in the drafty earthen hut, we shared a single coarse steamed bun. He saw my hands red from cold and suddenly pulled them into his chest. "Yunji, from now on, as long as I have a mouthful of meat, I will never let you survive on watery gruel." In that instant, watching the firelight dance in his eyes, the glacier that had frozen inside me for years quietly thawed. The Yoon family's so-called brocade and jade meals in the capital could not compare to the single thread of warmth this stubbled unknown man gave me. 7 years of border wind and sand ground the hands that once played the zither into calloused palms that pounded herbs. I opened the Jishi Hall in town, a modest 3-room earthen building, medicine counter in front, living quarters behind. People called me Physician Yun with respect. Gu Linyuan followed the villagers beyond the pass to trade furs or hunted in the mountains. Every coin he earned came straight to me. His dark armor lay buried at the bottom of a chest. In its place he wore faded coarse cloth and short tunics. The years had honed him into something steadier, the killing aura in his eyes completely restrained. "Mother, brother is secretly practicing spear again." 4-year-old Nuono tugged my apron, cheeks flushed. I peered into the backyard. 6-year-old Gu Changning gripped a sharpened wooden staff, stance firm, movements carrying the unmistakable aura of a future general who could shatter armies. His brows and eyes were the spitting image of Gu Linyuan's noble, refined, utterly out of place in this frontier wilderness. "Changning, rest a while and drink some mung bean soup." I wiped sweat from my brow and smiled. These 7 years, relying on the medical arts passed down from my maternal grandfather, I had treated border soldiers wounded by Hu raiders, and delivered countless difficult births for local women. Though life was hard, it was the most peaceful I had ever known. No stepmother's cold sarcasm, no father's calculating schemes. Only this small corner filled with the scent of herbs that truly felt like home. When Gu Lingyuan returned that day, he carried 2 fat wild rabbits and a bundle of rare snow lotus. He first brushed the dust from his clothes before daring to hug his daughter. "Keep the snow lotus safe. The apothecary will pay well for it, enough for thick winter clothes for the children." His voice was rough, but his gaze on me was so gentle it could melt snow. "You went into the deep mountains again? There are wolf packs there. Don't take such risks anymore." I scolded him even as my hands expertly took his outer robe and checked for injuries. He caught my fingers, calloused, carrying the weight of unspoken emotion. "You've suffered following me all these years." I shook my head. The Yun family's so-called luxury was merely arsenic wrapped in honey. Here I was my own master, my husband's wife, my children's mother, nothing else. Until one afternoon, a black carriage bearing the Yong'an Marquise Manor crest slowly crushed the silence of our little town. I was squatting at the doorway, sun-drying Angelica, when it stopped. An old man in fine silk, completely out of place in the dusty lane, stepped down, wrinkling his nose in disgust as he avoided the puddles. The moment he saw me, his cloudy eyes widened in disbelief. "Eldest miss." His voice shook. "It's Steward Joe of the Yong'an Marquise Manor. 7 years ago, when I left in disgrace, he hadn't spared me a single glance, too busy loading chests of silk for Yun Jiro." I stood, brushing herb residue from my hands, expression calm as still water. "Steward Joe, you've mistaken me. Here there is only the proprietress of Jishi Hall, no eldest miss. This old servant could never mistake you, miss. Your brows and eyes are identical to the late madam's." Steward Joe dropped to his knees in the mud with a thud, tears streaming. "The Marquis misses you terribly. He specially sent this old servant to bring you back to the capital and restore your name in the ancestral register. For 7 years he has said that as long as you admit your mistakes and return, he will personally arrange your marriage." I laughed coldly. "Admit my mistakes? What mistakes have I committed? Returning to the capital is only because the Yong'an Marquise Manor has run into some obstacle it cannot overcome and needs me to be their scapegoat." "Mother, who is this old man? Why is he crying so ugly?" Gu Changning emerged from the backyard, wooden staff in hand, eyes sharp as blades. The killing aura honed from years in a world of corpses and blood made Steward Joe's sobs catch in his throat. The steward's lofty posture collapsed completely at the sight of the boy. He collapsed onto the ground, finger trembling as he pointed at Changning. "Eldest miss, you actually bore children with this wild man of the wilderness? 2 of them. If word reaches the capital, where will the Marquis Manor's face go?" I was about to retort when heavy footsteps sounded from the backyard. Gu Lingyuan strode in, carrying a bundle of freshly chopped firewood on one shoulder and half a side of fresh pork in his other hand. His stubbled face looked especially stern in the northern twilight. Though dressed in coarse cloth, every movement carried the oppressive presence of a man who had walked through battlefields. He tossed the firewood into the yard with a heavy thud, shot Steward Joe a single glance, then casually wiped his hands on a rough cloth. The gesture was relaxed yet radiated unmistakable danger. He walked to my side and naturally slipped an arm around my waist, voice low and cold. "Where did this old trash come from, wailing like a funeral mourner at my door?" Steward Joe stumbled back 3 steps, terrified by that gaze, the gaze of a man who had truly killed. You crude fellow, do you even know who she is? She is the legitimate eldest daughter of the Yong'an Marquise Manor. Marrying her without permission is a capital crime." "Capital crime?" I smiled faintly and produced the marriage document bearing our fingerprints, along with the torn page from the family register. "Steward Joe, 7 years ago I already signed the papers before Yunjinhai. I am now a lawfully registered commoner woman, under Great Zhou law. My husband is a registered law-abiding citizen of the Northern Garrison Army. If you wish to press charges, take it to the Ministry of Justice or the Imperial Clan Court." Steward Joe's face cycled from green to white to red, finally settling into the ashen gray of utter defeat. He had come because the capital's situation had changed dramatically. The powerful patron Yun Jiro had tried to cling to had fallen. The current prince of Zhenbei Gu Lingyuan, who now controlled the military, had specifically requested a marriage alliance with the legitimate eldest daughter of the Yun family from years past. Only then did Yun Zhenhai remember the daughter he had exiled to the border, and desperately tried to drag her back as a lifeline. But this lifeline had not only pricked his hand, it had taken root and grown strong. "Eldest miss, can you bear to watch the market drown in trouble?" Steward Joe switched to pleading. "If you return with me and leave these 2 children here in the borderlands, we can say you spent these 7 years praying in a temple." I slapped him across the face so hard his cheek swelled instantly. My children are not for a slave like you to decide. My words were ice. At that exact moment, a pair of armored riders thundered into the alley. The soldiers in dark armor numbered over 100. The leading general dismounted and, before everyone's eyes, dropped to one knee before Gu Linyuan, who had just been about to light the cooking fire. This general greets your highness the prince. The rebellion in the capital has been quelled. Please return to the capital with the princess consort and assume command of the situation. Steward Zhou's eyes rolled back. He toppled straight into a nearby water barrel. I turned to look at Gu Linwen. Beneath the rough man disguise was the deep strategy he had quietly built over years in the north, consolidating military power. He didn't even glance at the kneeling general. He only looked at me with a trace of grievance. The pork isn't stewed yet. Leaving now would be such a waste. The day I returned to the capital, spring bathed the city in gentle light. The gates of the Yong'an Marquise Manor were tightly shut. White mourning cloth hung from the eaves, giving the place a desolate, defeated air. Yun Junhai had been imprisoned for embezzling imperial funds and withholding my late mother's dowry. Though pardoned, he had been demoted 3 ranks. The once bustling manor now stood empty. I sat inside the 6-horse prince's carriage, Nuonuo drowsy in my arms. Gu Chongning rode proudly beside Gu Linyuan on horseback. The carriage halted at the manor gates. Steward Zhou scrambled inside to announce us. Moments later, Yun Junhai, Si Qin, and Yun Zhiro came stumbling out. Yun Junhai's hair was streaked with white. All his former authority had vanished. The moment he saw Gu Linyuan in his golden, Qilin-embroidered prince's robes, his legs gave way and he collapsed to his knees in the street. Your Highness, this old minister failed to greet you from afar. Please forgive me. I lifted the carriage curtain and stepped down slowly, supported by Hongxiu. I wore a red-gold phoenix coronet and the formal crimson robes of a princess consort, the very glory my mother should have enjoyed. Lord Yun, you've mistaken me, I said, looking down at him, voice utterly calm. I am the princess consort of Zhenbei, not the disgraced daughter you exiled to the border to suffer. Yun Junhai jerked his head up, staring at me in shock, lips trembling. You actually became a princess consort? Quickly help him up. We're family, let's go inside and talk. Yunjiru's eyes were already swollen from crying. She wore an out-of-season silk gown, grinding her teeth in hatred. Sister, how could you hide such a transformation? You caused father to suffer in prison and prevented me from taking your place. I cut her off with a cold laugh and flung a thick ledger from my sleeve. Lord Yun, I did not return today to reminisce. This is the complete list of my mother's dowry that the Liu family sold off, including the 3 prosperous shops you renamed and the fertile fields at the edge of town. Return everything within half an hour, or the imperial clan court and the Caesarate will investigate this account in full. Liu Xichin shrieked. That money was already spent on Jiro's dowry. You're trying to kill us. Gu Linyuan stepped forward. The blade at his waist rang with lethal intent. The killing aura honed on the frontier instantly blanketed the entire street. This prince's consort will reclaim what belongs to her. Whoever dares utter the word kill will answer to me. Yun Junhai looked into Gu Linyuan's eyes, then at Ge Chengning's features, so clearly Ge family blood, and aged 20 years in a single breath. He finally understood. This daughter was no longer someone he could control. Return it all to the princess consort, he rasped, collapsing completely. The treasures they had once guarded like life itself were carried out of the manor by servants. I watched the familiar objects and felt the 7 years of resentment that had weighed on my chest finally dissolve. I never set foot inside that filthy house. I didn't even spare Yun Junhai another glance. Father, our home is much prettier than this. I don't like it here. Gu Chongning tugged Gu Linyuan's hand, his little face full of disdain. Gu Linyuan laughed heartily, swung his son onto the horse and looked at me with eyes brimming with indulgence. Wife, once we have everything, let's go. The prince's manor has your favorite frontier milk tea waiting. I stepped back into the carriage. The once unattainable vermilion gates of the Yong'an Marquis Manor shrank behind us in a cloud of dust. 7 years ago, those gates had filled me with despair. 7 years later, the vast world beyond them had given me rebirth. In the end, the wind of the capital could never compare to the free, boundless wind of the border. This is the second story. I had barely set foot inside the capital's gates, my rear not yet warmed on the tea-house's wooden bench, when a thunderous earth-shaking howl exploded beside my ear. That voice carried a full-bodied, mischievous vigor that made my heart lurch. The teacup in my hand nearly slipped. That spine-tingling familiarity could belong to only one person in this world. The moment my eyes left him, he was capable of tearing down houses and ripping off roof tiles. No one else but my own son Yan Chao could raise such a racket. I tossed down 2 copper coins without hesitation, shoved through the gawking crowd and forced my way inside. In the open yard behind the tea house, a lavishly dressed little fatty lay sprawled in the mud, tears and snot streaming down his face as he wailed. Meanwhile, my own little one, dressed like a plump lucky doll, was straddling the fatty's back with perfect composure, small hands gripping the boy's collar while he shouted, "Giddy up, horse! Run faster, slow, and there's no grass for you. Yan Chao, get down here this instant." My liver trembled with rage. But this was the capital, right beneath the Son of Heaven's feet, not our remote border town where we could do as we pleased. Hearing my voice, little Nuo not only refused to be afraid but twisted around and beamed at me, revealing a row of tiny pearly milk teeth. "Mother, this horse was born sturdy, just with a terrible temper. I'm simply teaching him a lesson for his master. How dare you, you wild bastard! How dare you lay hands on the imperial grandson?" A furious roar erupted behind me. Before I could drag my son off, a blast of cold wind swept past my back. The next instant, a viselik grip seized the nape of my neck and lifted me clean off the ground like a helpless chick. Ow, who the let go? I kicked wildly and craned my neck to look back. What filled my vision was a dark robe embroidered with cloud patterns. My gaze traveled upward and slammed straight into a pair of deep, icy eyes like a frozen winter pool. The man was extraordinarily tall, radiating the ruthless killing aura of one who had walked through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. His face was currently thunder dark, so black ink might drip from it. My blood froze. 4 years. I would recognize that face even if it turned to ash. And here it was, crashing into my sight without the slightest warning. He wasn't looking at me. His stare was locked on little Nuo, still perched atop the fatty's back. Little Nuo, apparently startled by the bone-chilling aura, finally slid off. He patted the dust from his bottom, lifted his little chin, and glared straight back at Qixiao without a trace of fear. One face frosted over, the other stubbornly defiant too, nearly identical faces locked in silent confrontation. The scene was so eerie the surrounding onlookers fell deathly silent. The little fatty Qixiao's nephew scrambled and rolled behind his uncle, pointing at little Nuo while howling, "Uncle, he hit me, he made me be his horse." Qixiao ignored his nephew's complaint entirely. He slowly released my collar and instead clamped onto my wrist with terrifying force, as if he meant to crush the bone. "Yan Chongning." The 3 words ground out between his teeth, each one sharp with ice. I steadied my nerves, plastered on a flawless fake smile, and yanked little Nuo behind me to shield him. "My lord, you must be mistaken. This humble woman is surnamed Yan, named Yan Dahua. We've only just arrived in the capital and don't know the rules. My child is mischievous and has disturbed you. I'll take him away at once." "Yan Dahua?" Qixiao let out a cold laugh, his gaze returning to little Nuo's face, voice dropping low yet carrying thunderous pressure. "Look this prince in the eye and say that again. What is your name?" Little Nuo poked his head out from behind me, tilted it, studied Qixiao for half a beat, then blurted in astonishment, "Mother, this man looks exactly like the portrait father left behind." Could it be? My heart slammed against my ribs. I was about to slap a hand over my leaky little cotton-padded jacket of a son's mouth when Qixiao's lazy voice drifted over. Could it be what? He stared at little Nuo, and for the first time his tone carried a faint, almost imperceptible tremor. I cut in first, straightening my neck and shouting, "Could it be that you're the debt collector who still owes our household 50 taels of silver? My son said his father once painted your portrait. He met a down-on-his-luck rogue who refused to repay a debt and told him to remember to collect when he grew up." The corner of Qixiao's eye twitched hard. He bent down, face black as midnight, seized little Nuo by the collar, and lifted the miniature version of himself to eye level. Teeth gritted, he demanded, "Don't listen to your mother's nonsense. Tell me, who is your father?" Dangling in midair, little Nuo didn't cry. He crossed his arms, copied Qixiao's usual posture, furrowed his little brows, and sighed like an old man. "Asking about private matters is terribly rude, uncle. But since you look so familiar, I'll tell you. My father's gravegrass is already 3 zhang tall, dead as dead can be. Right now mother is bringing me to the capital to remarry." I clearly heard Qixiao's teeth grind. In the quiet back alley, the sound was especially crisp and sent chills down the spine. Veins bulged at his temples. The fingers gripping little Nuo's collar turned bone white. For one terrifying moment I thought he might actually hurl my son away. "Gravegrass 3 zhang tall?" Qixiao's voice was colder than an iron chain pulled from an ice cellar. "You really dare say that?" His hawk-sharp eyes locked onto me. My heart pounded like a war drum, yet my face remained steady as an old dog's. I snatched little Nuo back into my arms and glared at Qixiao with righteous fury. "Your Highness's words are strange. Everyone faces birth, old age, sickness, and death. My late husband held my hand on his deathbed and begged me again and again to find a good match for myself and our son. Is there anything wrong with that? Little Nuo, safely back in my embrace, cooperated beautifully. He shrank against me and added pitifully, "That's right. Mother said the old must go before the new can come. Uncle, you're handsome, but you don't look rich at all, and you're so fierce. Not fit to be my new father." A few suppressed chuckles rippled through the crowd. The mighty heir to the Prince of Jing'an, the god of war who commanded the capital's 5 wards, had just been openly despised by a 4-year-old for being poor and fierce. Qi Xiao ignored us. He turned to the little fatty, still rubbing his bottom on the ground. The boy shuddered and snapped to attention, face mournful. "Uncle, this is the one you claimed was bullied by a wild bastard?" Qi Xiao glanced at his nephew's mud-streaked clothes. "Take him back and receive punishment without fail." A dignified imperial grandson ridden like a horse by a 4-year-old brat, the Qi family's face has been utterly lost. The little fatty nearly wet himself and scurried away, supported by attendants. Sensing disaster, I grabbed little Nuo's hand and tried to slip deeper into the alley. I hadn't taken 2 steps before an icy sword blocked my throat. "Yan Chongning, did this prince grant you permission to leave?" Qi Xiao strode forward, blocking the only exit. His towering shadow swallowed us both. 4 years ago, you set a fire, and left behind nothing but a charred corpse. Now you return to the capital with a child who looks exactly like me, claiming you're here to remarry. Do you truly believe this capital is your personal stage to dance upon as you please? I was forced to tilt my head back, the blade cold against my skin. I drew a deep breath and forced calm. Your Highness must be lovesick and mistaking me for someone else. This humble woman's late husband was surnamed Yan, so I go by Yan Chongning. He was a renowned scholar in our border town. Investigate if you doubt me. If a single word is false, may lightning strike me dead. We lived in hiding there. Our household registers were forged by black market contacts. Unless you raise that entire region, you'll find no flaw. Qi Xiao's cold gaze slowly rose. He lifted a stray lock of hair at my temple, voice laced with cruel amusement. "Oh? Then explain your child's appearance." I kept my expression perfectly blank. Many people in this world look alike. Perhaps my late husband's handsome features simply resembled your Highness's. Or perhaps your Highness has a long-lost brother wandering the world. My husband was actually your Highness's long-lost uncle. Little Nuo's eyes lit up. He clapped and shouted, "Oh, I understand now, so you're my big nephew." "Shut up," Qi Xiao roared, veins jumping faster. At that moment, armored patrol soldiers hurried over. Seeing Qi Xiao, they saluted at once. The captain lowered his voice. "Your Highness, urgent summons from the palace. His Highness the Prince requests your immediate presence to discuss critical matters at the Shijin border. Delay is unacceptable." Qi Xiao sheathed his sword, gaze lingering on my face for a long moment. I knew he was weighing priorities. State affairs always came before personal grudges. "Yan Chongning, since you've returned to the capital, don't even think of running again." He bent and gave little Nuo's tender cheek a hard pinch. The boy's eyes instantly filled with tears. "I'll summon the best physician to see exactly how that grave grass grew 3 zhang tall." With that, he mounted his horse. His dark cloak carved a sharp, cold arc through the air as he galloped away in a swirl of dust. Watching his retreating back, my spine-once ramrod straight collapsed. "Mother, do we still need to find a new father?" Little Nuo rubbed his cheeks, little face scrunched. "Big nephew's hands are really strong. I don't want him to be my son anymore." "Find. We must find one." I gritted my teeth. "Not only will we find one, we'll find the richest, most powerful man who can protect us best, just to infuriate that cold-faced ghost." My low-profile plan to sell medicine and grow rich had been thoroughly ruined. The most urgent task now was to find a solid protective umbrella in the capital. I dragged little Nuo straight to the largest gold shop. A lavish matchmaking notice was posted there, the capital's richest merchant seeking a bride for his lame only son. If I could become that merchant's daughter-in-law, I'd have legitimate protection. Even if Qi Xiao was furious, he couldn't openly snatch a common woman in broad daylight, assuming he hadn't completely lost his mind. I brought little Nuo along, trampling every noble's bottom line as we barged forward. The merchant's surname was Pei. Though not among the surnames I avoided, the Pei family was a towering presence in the capital. Pei Ziheng, the only son, had broken his leg in a childhood riding accident. Though he walked with difficulty now, he possessed a gentle, jade-like countenance. Crucially, the Pei family lacked an heir, and desperately needed a young madam who could uphold the household's dignity. They cared nothing for prior marriages, only that the bride's background was clean and she was clever. I stood before the Pei Manor gates, in full view of the capital's entire matchmaking queue, and ripped the notice straight off the wall. "Mother, that uncle isn't as handsome as big nephew," little Nuo muttered, tugging my sleeve. I bent, covered his mouth and hissed into his ear, "Handsome doesn't fill the rice bowl. We need silver and a backer to stay alive. Remember, when you meet young Master Pei, call him Daddy. The sweeter the better." Little Nuo blinked, half understanding, and looked toward the gates. Pei Ziheng was indeed a refined gentleman, wheeled out by servants. His cool gaze swept over me before settling on little Nuo's strikingly conspicuous little face. The corner of his mouth curved in a meaningful smile. "Young lady, your child possesses truly extraordinary bearing. He takes after his father. Sadly, his father passed early." I kept my face unchanged and handed over the forged household registers I had prepared long ago in the border town. "This humble woman comes from a family of physicians and possesses some medical knowledge. Though I bring a child, he is sensible, and will cause no trouble for the Pei household." Just as Pei Ziheng reached for the documents, dense hoofbeats thundered from the street corner. "The heir to the Prince of Jing'an arrives, commoners and idlers, clear the way." The sound struck like muffled thunder. My heart trembled. I instinctively tried to snatch the documents back, but Pei Ziheng's hand was faster. He calmly tucked the red paper into his robe, gaze fixed straight ahead. Qi Xiao, mounted on a black horse with snow-white hooves, reined in arrogantly before the Pei Manor. He had changed into a moon-white robe, yet that natural commanding aura of a general still silenced every vendor and onlooker. He stared at me, eyes burning holes through my body. Young Master Pei certainly has refined tastes. Qi Xiao dismounted cleanly and walked behind me. He deliberately lowered his head, voice cold and low, meant only for my ears. "You just claimed you wished to remarry, yet your toes are already at the Pei family's threshold. Yan Chongning, your taste in men has truly declined." I straightened, turned, and smiled politely but distantly. "Your Highness has a poor memory. This humble woman, Yan Chongning, finds young Master Pei gentle, refined, and from a proper family far superior to those crude brutes who swing swords and glare at every turn." Qi Xiao's eyes darkened further. He suddenly turned to Pei Ziheng. "Young Master Pei, are you certain you've thoroughly investigated this woman's background?" Pei Ziheng slowly tucked my documents away and cupped his hands toward Qi Xiao, tone mild yet neither servile nor overbearing. "Your Highness need not concern yourself. Lady Yan's medical skill is superb. She can heal my crippled legs. This is the fated connection Pei has long sought. As for her past, Pei does not care." He might not care, but a certain someone cared desperately. Little Nuo suddenly bounced out, pointing at the lavish betrothal gifts piled by the Pei family, eyes shining. "Big nephew, are you here to deliver wedding gifts? Mother said these are all my remarriage fees. I'm finally getting a new daddy." Qi Xiao's face turned pitch black. He strode forward, stopped before the pile of priceless pearls and agates, and suddenly kicked srash. The sandalwood chest filled with gold ingots overturned, golden ingots scattering across the ground. "This trash is called betrothal gifts?" Qi Xiao sneered. From his robe he flung a heavy black iron command token that smashed onto the Pei Manor threshold. "This prince declares today, even if this woman marries, she enters only the gates of my prince's manor. If young Master Pei values his life, he may continue this farce." The entire street gasped. This was no patrol. This was outright bride-snatching. I shook with fury, pointing at his nose. "Qi Xiao, you wrote the divorce papers yourself back then. What madness is this? Divorce papers?" He stared at me, voice hoarse, each word deliberate. "Yan Chongning, this prince never wrote any divorce papers. That year you burned the courtyard and fled. This debt we will settle slowly back at the manor." He bent without another word, scooped little Nuo under one arm, clamped my wrist like an iron vise, and dragged us both onto the prince's carriage under Pei Ziheng's deep gaze. The wheels creaked. The carriage interior was colder than a tomb. I was pinned into a corner of the soft couch, red marks burning on my wrist. Little Nuo, however, was utterly relaxed. He brazenly occupied Qi Xiao's usual seat, gnawing a tribute pear with loud crunches, little eyes occasionally glancing at his biological father's face. "Yan Chongning, you had quite the nerve back then." Qi Xiao finally spoke, voice hoarse, violence suppressed to the breaking point. "You swapped a fake corpse for your life, set a fire that left not even a single strand of hair for this prince. Your Highness remembers poorly. It was an accident." I turned to watch the swaying curtain. "When the fire broke out, you were accompanying that life-saving benefactor, admiring lanterns. An unfavored side consort dying in a cold, desolate courtyard. Didn't that suit everyone's wishes perfectly?" Qi Xiao's body jolted, fingers gripping his knee clenched hard. "Who told you I was admiring lanterns?" He leaned closer, familiar cold fragrance mixed with fury crashing over me. That night I led troops pursuing assassins who had infiltrated the capital. By the time I returned, half the sky was already ablaze. I rushed in to find you and nearly died beneath the rubble, and now you tell me that suited my wishes? I froze. So that was the truth? But I immediately gave a self-mocking laugh. Even so, what does it matter? That icy prince's manor was never a place for me and my son. There's no point speaking of it now. I pulled little Nuo close. Qishao, ours was an imperial decree marriage. Though you wrote no divorce papers, the entire capital believes the princess consort died in that fire. The current me is Yan Chongning. I have no relationship with you whatsoever, not even half a copper coin's worth. You're dreaming. He let out a cold laugh, gaze falling on little Nuo. His eyes grew extraordinarily complex. What is this child's name? Yan Chao. The Chao from Morning Glow. I hid nothing was no point. Yan Chao, Qishao repeated softly. He suddenly reached out to touch little Nuo's head. Little Nuo slurped, tossed the pear core into the basket, agilely dodged and wiped his forehead in disgust. Big nephew, men and women must keep distance. Fathers and sons must keep distance too. Although you look like my father, I checked Uncle Pei has a gold mine. What do you have? Qishao's hand froze midair, rebuked by his own son's sharp tongue. He actually laughed, but the sound was all gritted teeth. The carriage jolted to a stop. The heavy black lacquered gates of the Jing'an prince's manor appeared before me once more. I was dragged and pulled into the fragrant pavilion. The room was exactly as I remembered, even the missing hairpin spot on the curtain remained unchanged. Stay here, go nowhere. Qishao locked the door behind him, dark eyes fixed on me. I've already sent men to investigate that Pei fellow. If you dare entertain remarriage thoughts again, I'll personally sever both his legs and tie you to this bed. You're insane. I grabbed a soft pillow and hurled it at him. He let it strike his chest without dodging, red-eyed, voice suddenly low. You call me insane? The moment I saw you burned to ash 4 years ago, I was already insane. Night fell. No lamps lit the room. Little Nuo slept soundly in the inner chamber, soft snores rising and falling. I had just climbed onto the windowsill to escape when a scorching body pressed against my back. Qishao had entered at some point. He wrapped both arms tightly around my waist from behind, strength as if he meant to knead me into his very bones and blood. Changning, don't run anymore. His chin rested on my shoulder, voice carrying a plea. That child asked me for silver, for rank, whatever he wants, I'll give. If you wish to be the richest woman in the land, I'll hand you every key to this manor. Please, don't take him to remarry. I felt dampness at the back of my neck. This god of war who bled on battlefields without shedding a tear, was crying. The defensive wall I had built in my heart for 4 long years cracked open in that instant. Before I could push him away, little Nuo, whether awakened by a full bladder or tempted by the promise of manor keys, pattered out barefoot. He rubbed sleepy eyes, stared at us pressed together, froze for a heartbeat, then strode forward like a miniature adult. He wedged himself firmly between us and shoved us apart. Big nephew, that's not fair at all. Little Nuo planted both hands on his hips and glared up at Qishao. If you want to be my father, compete openly. Sneaking an attack on my mother in the middle of the night, what kind of hero does that make you? Let me tell you, Uncle Pei sent candied hawthorns this afternoon. Qishao's earlier sentiment vanished like smoke. He wiped his face, gritted his teeth, and squatted to meet little Nuo's eyes. From now on you eat nothing from him. Tomorrow I'll buy every single string of candied hawthorns in the entire capital. Childish. I rolled my eyes. The tiny ripple in my heart was instantly extinguished by this ridiculous father-son pair. I had expected Qishao to lock me away as before. Who would have guessed that the very next morning he would respectfully invite my old nemesis, the most rigid minister of rights in court, to the manor. Since Chongning now bears the surname Yan, we cannot violate propriety. Qishao stood in the courtyard before the entire household, pointing at boxes upon boxes of National Treasury treasures, and declared loudly, "This prince formally proposes marriage to Lady Yan today. Old accounts are settled. We begin anew." He had thought it through. He no longer obsessed over my escape, and wished to grant me a legitimate, even grander status than the original imperial decree. But this beginning anew quickly became the capital's favorite joke. The mighty god of war to please little Nuo rose at dawn daily to practice martial arts with this little ancestor, only to have 3 white marble bricks shattered by little Nuo's heaven-sent strength. To please me he studied bitter medical texts, yet mistook rhubarb for licorice, and was sentenced by me to copy key points for 3 full days in the study. Just when the entire capital assumed I would finally relent and remarry this cold-faced bootlicker, Pei Ziheng appeared once more at the prince's manor gates. Still in his wheelchair, he arrived with a grand procession of carriages, loaded not with gold, but with rare medicinal herbs and solitary ancient texts from every corner of the realm. Your Highness, Lady Yan once promised to heal my legs. This connection cannot be severed. Pei Ziheng smiled gently, yet his gaze fixed squarely on my windowsill. Chishu could no longer sit still. He hoisted little Nuo onto his shoulders and strode to the gates like a black panther guarding its territory. Healing legs is acceptable. There are plenty of empty rooms in this manor. But if you dare mention even half a word of marriage again, I'll ensure your remaining leg suffers equally. In the end, little Nuo emerged the biggest winner. Left hand clutching the ancient text gifted by Uncle Pei, right hand gripping the candied hawthorns bought by his biological father, he sat atop the highest wall of the prince's manor and shouted, "Mother, if you haven't chosen yet, why not consider the newly crowned top scholar? I hear he looks quite a bit like my father too. Yanxiao, get down here." Qixiao and I roared in perfect unison. As the sun sank in the west, the prince's manor was no longer filled with cold rules and loneliness. I watched the man who desperately tried to blend into our mother and son life, who was endlessly toyed with by his own son yet never tired of it, and finally sighed, letting go of any thought of running. I did not know how tall the grave grass would grow in this world, but the red plum blossoms in the prince's manor seemed to have bloomed especially early this year, and especially vibrantly.